Teresa Skubic, and this is Forum Daily for Tuesday, June 30th. More than $100,000 has already been raised to help restore 24 Sussex Drive, just days after Prime Minister Mark Carney announced plans to renovate the historic residence. The Rideau Hall Foundation, which is overseeing the fundraising campaign, says it received more than 200 online donations over the weekend, averaging around $257 each. The foundation says an additional $50,000 in pledged donations has also been committed, bringing the total raised to more than $100,000. While the project's final cost has not yet been determined, the fundraising campaign is aiming to raise $50 million. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Nunavik today for meetings with Inuit leaders and a delegation of cabinet ministers, including those responsible for energy, public safety, and defense. It marks the first visit by a sitting prime minister to the village in nearly 20 years. The Inuit to Crown Partnership Committee brings federal ministers and Inuit leaders together 3 times a year, with the Prime Minister attending one of those sessions. Today's meeting will focus on a range of issues, including Arctic sovereignty, security and defense, housing, food security, the proposed Inuit University, and Inuit health and wellness.
Inuit are the foremost experts on the Arctic. We know our lands, waters, environment, and communities best. Our treaties with the Crown provide legal certainty and a legal framework for working together in a unique way that is something that we must foster in this space. Canada is positioned well to build on this strong foundation of knowledge and expertise to advance an Arctic policy informed by the people who live here. We stand with Canada as proud Canadians. But as in any working relationship, there's always room for improvement. And today, we will be discussing potential solutions for improved coordination between Inuit and the federal government on Arctic security and defense. We also will be working on items such as affordability, the Inuit Child First Initiative, and international issues, and many other items.
Ottawa police are investigating what they believe was a double murder-suicide after 2 young boys were found dead inside a home, and their father was later discovered dead in a vehicle about 60 kilometers south of the city. Officers found the boys, aged 7 and 12, during a wellness check at a home in Ottawa's Finley Creek neighborhood on Monday morning. Provincial police are also investigating several locations connected to the case, including a vehicle fire at a carpool lot in Kemptville, where the boy's father was found dead. Police say 2 fires linked to the investigation are also under review.
Today, just shortly before 10 o'clock in the morning, the Ottawa Police received a call from a third party asking us to do a wellness check at an address in the Finley Creek area in the city of Ottawa. Upon inspection, officers found 2 deceased young boys, aged 8 and 12, believed to be brothers. Obviously, that started an investigation on our side. Shortly after that, we, in our connection with the Ottawa Provincial Police, they identified a vehicle fire that was in the Kemptville area, Rita View and 416 Car Park. From that information, we were able to kind of link together the 2 cases that we believe to be a double homicide and suicide. There was also a building fire in the Iroquois area that we also believe is linked. A great deal of information and investigation is still required with the Ottawa Police and the OPP to piece together all these different elements. And so at this time, we're limited in the information that we are going to share. Obviously, it's a very tragic incident for the families, the friends, neighbors. It's when certain children are involved, it's extra difficult to understand. So we're trying to give the family a little bit of time as well to grieve with that prior to identifying the identity of the deceased, as well as give them an opportunity to ensure that all family members have been contacted with.
A prominent gun control advocacy group is renewing its call for an immediate halt to new sales of SKS rifles following last week's deadly shooting in Montreal. Police did not publicly confirm the type of firearm used in the attack that killed a Montreal police officer and a citizen, but it has since been confirmed that the suspect used an SKS rifle, a semi-automatic weapon of Russian origin dating back to the 1950s. In a statement, Police Souvin urged the federal Liberals to suspend new sales of SKS models. Mark Carney spoke on the potential bans.
I'm just following up from a colleague's question in French previously. Based on the recent tragedy in Montreal, the mayor of Montreal is renewing calls for extended gun control. Of course, Quebec has a relatively strict gun regime, and so does Canada. Your critics are criticizing your current approach in terms of, in their view, targeting law-abiding firearms owners, and that won't solve the problem of public safety and security. What do you say to those critics?
Well, I'd say, and I'm going to refer to my previous answer. I'll expand. Ultimately, we're addressing violent crime, the most heinous violent crimes, crimes motivated by hate, crimes motivated by misogyny, crimes motivated by, well, these aspects potentially including, and I'm not referring to the specific circumstances as I say this, but potentially including acts of terrorism. We need a multifaceted approach here. Part of it is gun control, and ensuring that with respect to gun control, one of our responsibilities, of course, is to act within our constitutional responsibilities. As you would know, there are Supreme Court challenges and Supreme Court review that is in train. Possible decision next year in terms of our firearm, some aspects of our firearm measures. So we have to act consistent, obviously, within the law. Number one.
Our correspondent Lucas Mitchstick sat down with Noah Schwartz, an assistant professor of political science at the University of Fraser Valley, to unpack this further.
Professor, thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me.
So what does the SKS firearm continue? Why does it continue to sit in a legal gray zone in Canada's gun control framework?
Yeah, the SKS is a little bit different. It's an older firearm. It was designed in the Soviet Union, so that gives you a hint of how old it is. And it works a little bit differently than a lot of semi-automatic rifles, which are loaded by removable magazines. So in the government's definition that they came out with of an assault-style firearm, one of the big components is a removable magazine, and the government's argument is that makes these guns faster to reload and therefore potentially more dangerous in a mass shooting. Now, we can talk maybe later about whether the data bears that out, but that's the government's definition. The SKS normally is loaded by what's called a stripper clip, which is a piece of metal that the rounds are attached to, and it's a more laborious loading process. So I think that's one of the big reasons why it was left out, for example, of the recent ban on so-called assault-style firearms. It doesn't really fit that framework. It's also very commonly owned. We don't have good records since the long gun registry was abolished, but I would feel comfortable saying it's one of the most widely owned firearms in Canada because it was very, very affordable. It was dumped on the surplus market. And therefore, up until a few years ago, one could be had for just a few $100s.
Professor, after the Montreal shootings last week, gun control advocates are calling for an immediate halt to the sales. How effective do you think that would be from a policy perspective?
I don't think it would be hugely effective, right? These long guns owned by legally owned firearms owners are not the principal tool being used in crime in Canada, despite the fact that they, might be used occasionally, once in a while. The reality is the majority of guns being used in crime are coming from the United States and largely being smuggled in by organized crime. As we saw in another police shooting that happened in June, for example, the death of Constable Mark Pisanoto in Toronto. This is probably a much more prototypical violent incident in Canada than these sort of outlier incidents involving long guns. There's also the open question right now of whether the government's initial prohibition of assault-style weapons from 2020 is constitutional. The Supreme Court is going to be reviewing that in a few months' time. So I think it was actually very sensible. Prime Minister Carney took a very sensible approach in saying, let's hold off, let's wait and see. I think that's probably the best approach.
And now, what would a clear and effective policy approach look like if the goal is to reduce weapons like the SKS?
Yeah, I think the approach is to tackle the root causes, right? There's an element of supply and demand that's involved in crime, right? And we've been tackling the supply of illegal weapons with these policy, but unfortunately, that's not fully in our control. We live next to a country that has more guns than people. We have a very large and porous border, and we have seen the rise. Another thing that I document in my book, Off Target, is the rise of 3D printed weapons, which are becoming increasingly a factor in crime, and once again, are very, very very difficult for us to control. So we have to start looking at the demand, right? Why are people turning to firearms to settle disputes, to protect their turf, to engage in the drug trade, and use things like violence interruption programs, invest in intelligence, right? It's still very early in the investigation into this incident. We don't really know a lot about the individual involved other than the manifesto they published online. We don't know whether, there were red flags, such as in Tumbler Ridge, right, where that individual was talking to ChatGPT about what they plan to do. So I think investing in intelligence is another really good way to try to prevent these incidents.
A key deadline for North America's free trade agreement is expected to pass this week without a deal to renew it. The United States is set to formally notify Canada and Mexico on Wednesday of its intentions for the Continental Trade Pact known in Canada as CUSMA. All indications suggest the Trump administration will not agree to extend the agreement before the July 1st deadline. Instead, the deal is expected to enter a rolling annual review process that could continue for up to 10 years. If no renewal is reached by then, CUSMA would expire. And Canada's former chief trade negotiator says he does not expect Ottawa to reach a tariff agreement with Washington before the U.S. midterm elections. Steve Verhoeven, who led Canada's negotiations during the renegotiation of the North American Free Trade Agreement in Trump's first term, is now principal at GT and Company. He told an online business audience Monday there may be a limited window if the Trump administration seeks a political win ahead of voters heading to the polls this fall.
I don't think there's been anything close to a good deal on the table so far. There were discussions last year, and a number of other countries reached agreement with the U.S., but those agreements are unlikely to stand the test of time over a period because they're not particularly solid agreements. So I don't think we'll see an outcome in the short term necessarily. There's a bit of a window around the U.S. midterms where the U.S. administration may be looking for some kind of win. If that happens, there's a possibility for it to come together. But I think it's more likely that the discussions will continue beyond the midterms and possibly even into next year. And I think that's the most likely outcome. Canada and Mexico have shown flexibility on a number of the bilateral issues, but the U.S. has not shown much movement on their side. So not a lot of incentive for Mexico and Canada to start to move towards closing the agreement. We have the advantage of the U.S. industry being almost unanimously supportive of continuing the USMCA or CUSMA. The general public in the U.S. also highly supportive of continuing the USMCA, and almost all Republican senators and congressmen more broadly continuing to support the renewal of the USMCA. So I think that over the slightly longer term, we have a strong possibility of getting where we need to be, but it's not going to be a smooth ride going forward.
While Canada and Mexico have both expressed interest in renewing the deal for another 16 years, the United States could instead push for annual reviews or potentially trigger an exit clause with 6 months' notice. And Ontario has signed a new agreement with Utah aimed at strengthening trade and economic ties as part of Premier Doug Ford's push to build closer relationships with individual U.S. states. Ford signed the Memorandum of Understanding with Utah Governor Spencer Cox on Monday. The agreement will expand cooperation in several sectors and encourage increased trade between the two jurisdictions. Utah is now the 10th U.S. state to sign an economic cooperation agreement with Ontario since 2023, joining states including Michigan, New York, Pennsylvania, and Illinois. Ontario Education Minister Paul Calandra is urging parents not to pull students out of school for sports tournaments, as new attendance-based grading rules come into effect next year. Starting in the upcoming school year, attendance and participation will make up either 10 or 15% of a final mark, depending on the grade. In grade 9 and 10, attendance and participation will be 15% of a final mark, and in grade 11 and 12, it will be 10%. While some absences for sports events can still be excused, Calandra says they should not become routine, pointing to low attendance rates in Ontario high schools. Australia is stepping up enforcement against social media companies it says are failing to keep children off their platforms. The government has introduced legislation that would double penalties for companies that do not comply with the country's under 16 social media ban, pushing maximum fines to nearly 99 million Australian dollars. The changes would also expand the powers of Australia's online safety regulator, allowing it to compel tech companies to hand over internal documents and other evidence to prove compliance. I sat down with Yael Osowski, the Deputy Director of the Consumer Choice Centre, for Australia's latest move to ban social media. Now, Australia is doubling fines for companies that don't enforce its under 16 social media ban. What does this tell us about how seriously the government is taking this enforcement?
Well, realistically, you have the Albanese government in Australia that's really pinning all of their political agenda on this law. And they have been really since it went in force in December. And since we've seen it fail in real time, I believe the latest figures are something like over 80% of teens are still hanging on to their social media accounts. It means that they really are taking it seriously. And I think they're understanding the technical limits of what they're doing and the social limits as well, because young people want to be connected. They want to be online. I think the Australian government put a lot of influence into this. They put as much of their political capital into all of the limiting social media for young people kind of game, and they're seeing the real limits of that. And I think this is a very prescient moment because we're learning in many Anglosphere countries and even across continental Europe, many people would like to learn this from this policy or try to implement it in their own countries. And if Australia is showing that it's not working very well, I think that does show that it probably won't work very well elsewhere.
And from a policy perspective, do tougher fines actually improve compliance by tech companies, or do they risk unintended consequences?
You could maybe make an argument that some of the fines will act as more of an incentive. But, again, they've tried to do this as much as they can. And as much as you want to put fines on the companies, you have to realize that the people who are causing these fines to be issued are young people who want to be logged in, who want to connect with their friends, who want to be able to talk to family, and who want to use these platforms. And the platforms themselves, they've already deleted, upwards of 8 million accounts in Australia. So the question is, how much more can they do? And if they really are going to have to ramp up a lot more policing in order to comply with this, then that means that the social experience is going to be even worse. So I don't know if necessarily the fines being one notch higher are going to be much more effective. If anything, it's just going to lead to a worse online experience for people who are of age, who are above 16 and trying to use social media. So again, the government is trying through every single force they can think of, through every measure of law, and now amending the law to figure out if they can make this work. But I think they're going to learn that it's not going to be that simple.
Well, supporters argue that this is about protecting children online, and critics say that this actually could be overreach. Where do you land in that balance?
I think everyone wants to keep kids safe online, and I think most people are just really ignorant of the tools that already exist, that are native to all of the apps and the services that we already use, and there just hasn't been enough educational campaigning around it. So I obviously see that this is something that it goes too far because it's making the government more responsible for what kids see than their own parents. And I think that for me as a dad, for many parents who are reading about these laws or having to comply in some way, it really takes away a lot of their agency. And it's really going far beyond because it means that people like you and me are more impacted than most kids who are somehow able to keep their accounts. And I think this is just kind of an open design of how governments have been trying for 20 or 30 years to regulate the internet in some way. And I think that's what's so beautiful about technology and the internet is that we can try to put up as many roadblocks as we want. We can try to make things perhaps with an age gate or put some kind of limits on X or Y, but technology always finds a way. And particularly for the tech-enabled next generation, they're always going to find a way, especially when it comes to connecting with the people that they want to be connected with.
And would you say it's realistic to actually expect social media companies to fully prevent under 16s from accessing their platforms, or realistically, is it not really their problem?
I mean, I think it is their problem because they still could be subject to any kind of either civil litigation or criminal penalties. I mean, the fines that they're talking about are no joke. I mean, these are very high. You can go up to about 100 million Australian dollars, very similar to Canadian dollars. So that, that could be a big impact, particularly on a social media company. They have billions of dollars, but any kind of compliance fee or fine is a cost, and that cost is passed on to consumers who use to the service or digital ads that are served on the platform. So it's something that they take seriously. I mean, every one of these companies, you can just go on their website, you can click around on the app, and there are all kinds of parental safety features that they've discussed and implemented. It's been a key part of most of the big public meetings that they've had. Every time they have, a quarterly board meeting, this is something that's discussed as priority one. So they're definitely taking it seriously. It's just right now, technical capacity and then the ability of people to go around many of these restrictions. Because again, the tech-enabled young people who want to connect, they're not going to be necessarily stopped by any of the measures that the companies put forward. So we can not like any of the companies. We can put as much pressure as we want on the companies. At the end of the day, the people who are going around this ban and circumventing it are young people who want to be connected. And I think that's something we always have to think about, is that we have 15 and 16-year-olds who want to learn about the internet. They want to learn about technology. And we're in a globally connected world. You need this stuff to survive in 2026. So why are we trying to deprive them from that?
And could higher penalties actually backfire by encouraging companies to limit services or withdraw features in Australia?
Canada knows this very well. Australia knows this very well. They have their own online media bargaining act, in which a lot of people could not look at news on Facebook for a very long time. For Google, it was the same for a very long time. So if it gets to be too expensive, too costly, if it takes too much compliance, if you need more lawyers than you need engineers, then yeah, the company would be turned off.
With the AI revolution in full force, there is a growing debate over AI data centers unfolding across Canada. Over the weekend, hundreds of protesters took to the streets in Vancouver to protest two proposed data centers, calling on politicians to block their construction.
No data center! No data center! Stop AI! Stop AI!
In Ontario, Hamilton City Council recently approved a motion that could stop the development of any AI data centers in the city. And just along the highway in Mississauga, a mayoral hopeful is now campaigning on a stop to these projects, calling them American profiteering.
We need to pause all new data centers of this scale until we can put up some guardrails. We need to draw clear lines to prevent extreme consumption, low economic value projects to build us a better future. The world is changing, and we need to keep up. So it's important that you know where we stand. I stand against American profiteering in Mississauga.
Joining me now to unpack the growing frustration over AI data centers is our contributor, David Clement. Now, David, I want to start with the Vancouver proposals with the protesters. What exactly are they in opposition to, and what are the arguments against the specific proposals?
Yeah, so in Vancouver, it falls into a few buckets. It's largely the environment, which is either emissions or water usage. There are complaints about noise, and then complaints about jobs or a lack of jobs. What I think this really boils down to is just a classic case of NIMBYism, the not in my backyard phenomena that we see with condo developments, with low-income housing, with any big project that may create some temporary disruption in a community. But once you start to scratch the surface on any of those objections, they fall flat very, very quickly.
I want to talk about water first. So we know that AI data centers do use a lot of water, but how much water are we actually talking about, and is there a cause for concern?
Yeah, so no, there is not a cause for concern, especially not in the context of the other things that we tolerate in our lives. So first off, with the Vancouver proposal specifically, so the water is used to cool the AI data centers because cooling is an important part of making sure it doesn't overheat. It's a closed loop, meaning they recycle the water. It's about what the rainfall that hits the top of BC Place in a year. So it's negligible in that sense. One, because it's a closed loop. Even if it wasn't, though, the average golf course in Canada or BC uses like 300,000 gallons of water on a summer day just to keep grass green so that we can hit putts and slice a drive into the woods. Nobody complains, right? Nobody is protesting golf courses. Some people may have objections to golf courses and not golf, but they don't advocate that we strip down golf courses or not use them. Ironically, the same goes for almonds, right? A kilogram bag of almonds uses thousands and thousands and thousands of liters of water. Nobody is protesting at the grocery store to pull almonds off the shelves. Nobody is saying that there should be a law that says you can't eat almonds. So the water usage issue, one in BC in particular, is a closed loop. So it really is nonsense. But even if it wasn't, in comparison to the other things that we accept on a day-to-day basis, it is like 1/100th of the water usage of other agriculture, almonds, golf courses, you name it. It's significantly less and pales in comparison.
Well, there's no complaints because almonds and golf are pretty awesome. But I want to talk about noise because they are getting noise complaints. So is there merit to this argument that an AI data center would bring a lot of noise to a usually quiet neighborhood?
If you didn't have setbacks, there may be some merit to them. But almost all of these proposals have a setback, which is like a buffer zone, which reduces the decibels to like a dull hum, like a refrigerator hum. So negligible. It's about half of when a bus accelerates on a city street. These are the things that, again, we tolerate on a day-to-day basis. No one is advocating for the buses to stop running because they happen to hit 70 decibels hundreds of times a day in a city. So again, it's one of those things where, yes, it produces noise, but with proper setbacks and things like that, that noise issue goes down to something that would otherwise be normal or commonplace in any major city or any major suburb.
And on jobs, the mayoral candidate in Mississauga called the proposed project there low economic value. Is he right, given that data centers themselves don't usually employ many long term?
Yeah, so he's wrong because he's measuring jobs in the wrong way. So all of these centers have to be built. So that is laborers, technicians, HVAC installers, electricians. Those are all important jobs. These are the jobs that fund union pensions and keep a middle class alive. But his argument that there are no like permanent long-term jobs in a data center like there would be, let's say, a traditional building that has hundreds of staff, well, that's an argument against roads. That's an argument against laying fiber so that we all have internet. That's an argument against almost every public infrastructure project that gets built once and then is maintained. And yet it would be wildly irrational for anybody in municipal politics to advocate against, let's say, laying transmission wires for interconnectivity because it doesn't have a full-time staff operating 24/7. And so it just seems like a wild accusation to say I can't support this because people aren't going to be working there 24/7 when it's an infrastructure project, right? You build a bridge, the Gordie Howe Bridge. Thousands of people went into building it. Very few will go into maintaining it. Some will go into staffing it. Doesn't mean that the bridge is useless because thousands of people aren't still working on it after it's completed. That's kind of the point.
Now, you've recently written in the Winnipeg Free Press that Canadian cities are abandoning Canada's AI history.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
So, most people don't realize that the foundation of AI is actually Canadian. From labs in Toronto and Montreal, we're talking about renowned scholars who have gone on to win Nobel Prizes in their respective fields. And so we have a scenario where we created the engine, but we won't build the roads. And we're just going to be left on the sideline here in the process. And what makes this even more irritating is that processing capacity is needed regardless of whether or not we build these facilities here. And so an alternative would be, so processing capacity is necessary. Well, if we don't build them here, where are they going to get built? They're going to get built in the United States. So that is infrastructure, jobs, et cetera, you name it, going south of the border. Two, it depends on where the infrastructure is built. If it's built in a state like Kentucky, no disrespect to the fine people of Kentucky, they're plugging into more or less a coal energy grid. What is better? Having that in Vancouver, where over 90% of the energy and power used is renewable, or in Ontario, where it's majority nuclear? Or would it be better for the environment to have it be plugged into coal power and contributing emissions? I think if you care about the environment, obviously the answer is in Canada. And then there's the data sovereignty question of, is it important to house this infrastructure here for our own good?
Well, there have been a lot of discussions on AI data sovereignty. How does this play into the debate with these potential bans?
Yeah, it's again, it goes back to local politicians forgetting that the capacity is required whether we build it here or not. And so an example would be in BC. So the government processes thousands of units of data for a variety of different reasons. Right now, a lot of that goes to the US and then stored and comes back. For anyone who cares about the integrity of where data is stored, well, the argument would be easy. It would matter a lot to them that it's stored in Canada, within our borders, under Canadian law. That is a good thing, right? In the world, the growing concerns over hacking and foreign actors and all of this stuff, is it better that we could potentially house some of this here? That would be a great option to have.
And what about the straining of the power grids, or the possibility of generating more demand for power and inflating energy bills for local residents?
Yeah, I see this argument all the time, and they get the relationship backwards. So most of these AI data centers pay premium rates. So they're actually subsidizing the fixed costs associated with the infrastructure, which means that as they come into town, yes, there may be a larger draw on power demand, but they're paying premium rates, which allows for municipalities to keep rates the same or even lower for ratepayers. And so the inverse of what we see in the debate is actually occurring, where in the US, a lot of these data centers are causing either a stagnation or a lowering of power costs.
Well, David, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
According to Statistics Canada, the economy bounced back in April with real GDP rising 0.5%. The agency says growth was led by a strong performance in the oil and gas sector, helping lift the economy at the start of the second quarter. Gains were also seen across the range of industries, including manufacturing, construction, and the public sector. The rebound follows a contraction in March, which pushed first quarter growth slightly into negative territory and briefly raised concerns about a possible recession after back-to-back quarterly declines. The federal government is expanding its Greener Homes retrofit program to Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, Quebec, and British Columbia. The new program replaces the previous Greener Homes grant, which ran out of funding. Environment Minister Julie DeBruzen and Energy Minister Tim Hodgson made the announcement Monday at the International Energy Agency's global conference at Energy Efficiency in Montreal.
To that end, today I'm very pleased to announce that we will be expanding our successful Canada Green Homes affordability program to 4 more provinces: British Columbia, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and PEI. Now, low to medium income tenants and homeowners in those provinces can benefit from zero upfront cost home retrofits. Things like home pump installations or heat pump installations will not only make their homes more sustainable and comfortable, but can save a family hundreds of dollars a year.
This announcement is one step in something larger. Energy efficiency is one of the most practical tools we have to lower costs for Canadians. As we like to say, the cheapest unit of energy is the one you don't need to use. Through our national electricity strategy, which recognizes provincial jurisdiction, we have committed to supporting energy efficiency retrofits for up to 1 million homes across Canada. So there's more to come.
All 10 provinces now provide job protection for workers who need extended time off because of serious illness. The milestone comes after New Brunswick passed legislation increasing protected unpaid sick leave from 5 days to up to 27 weeks for illness or injury recovery. Across Canada, workers dealing with illnesses such as cancer can now take between 26 and 27 weeks of unpaid leave without losing their job. Quebec has had long-term sick leave protections for more than 2 decades, while similar measures have been introduced across the rest of the country over the past 2 years. The British Columbia Nurses Union has issued a 72-hour strike notice just weeks after its members voted to reject a tentative contract offer. The union represents 60,000 nurses and says the action signals growing frustration by its members with the pressures facing their profession and the healthcare system. Union President Adrian Geer says that nurses will be in a legal position to strike on Thursday if no progress is made in negotiations. Greer says that the strike notice is a demand for nurses to be heard and valued as they are facing increasing safety and burnout issues. The U.S. Supreme Court has ruled in favor of laws in West Virginia and Idaho that stop transgender girls and women from playing on girls' and women's sports teams in public schools and universities. The 6-3 decision overturns earlier court rulings that had sided with the students. The lower courts had said that the bans broke the U.S. Constitution and a federal anti-discrimination law. Today is the last day of rulings for the court's current term, which began in October. The Idaho and West Virginia laws assign school sports teams based on biological sex and stop students assigned male at birth from joining female teams. 25 other states have similar laws. Canada will face Morocco in the round of 16 at the World Cup after the team from North Africa defeated the Netherlands 3-2 in penalty kicks on Monday night in Mexico.
Felt like the center of the world. We had the French walking around us, the Brazilians, the Scots, the Algerians, the Argentinians. Everyone was there. New York feels like a conglomeration of the world. Here it feels very Mexican, it feels very Moroccan. So I think they're both unique, and it's a privilege and a blessing to be able to get to attend both.
It will mark the second straight World Cup featuring a showdown between Canada and Morocco. Canada advanced to the game with a 1-0 win over South Africa in the round of 32 game on Sunday in Los Angeles. It was Canada's first ever appearance in a World Cup knockout game. And Monday's action in the FIFA World Cup added another chapter to the book of all-time knockout upsets in the tournament, with title contenders Germany stunned by Paraguay at the round of 32 stage, adding yet more spice to an event that has already delivered plenty of drama at the group stage. For Germany, the result further deepened a disappointing run, with their international reputation taking a hit following back-to-back World Cup group stage exits in 2018 and 2022. It was South America's biggest win of the tournament, making their return to form after reaching the quarterfinals in 2010 and failing to qualify ever since.
Dios mío, fue súper sufrido, pero ¿qué paraguayo no sufre ante todas las adversidades y sale adelante como fue este genial grupo que tenemos? Gracias a los muchachos y al Faro por darnos esta alegría el día de hoy. Estoy súper feliz, súper feliz.
Fue uno de los momentos más aterradores que he vivido en el tema futbolístico. Pero eso sí, cuando comenzó el partido yo dije, tenemos chance, tenemos chance. Como siempre, la garra guaraní está cuando más se necesita.
Two-time NBA MVP Shai Gilgeous-Alexander will once again suit up for Canada basketball, joining the national team for the upcoming FIBA Men's Basketball World Cup 2027 Americas qualifiers. Gilgeous-Alexander is the biggest name on Canada's 16-player roster, which was announced Monday morning. SGA spoke to reporters about joining the roster and what it means to represent Canada again on the international stage.
Excited. Obviously, basketball is all of our pride and joys. Have fun playing it. And then to be able to do it on this platform with guys that we grew up with, guys that we played against growing up is another awesome feeling. But yeah, like Dylan said, super excited and ready to go. Yeah, I mean, playing for your country is something I dreamed about as a kid. And being able to have the opportunity to do so, I just choose the opportunity to do so every single time. It's that simple for me. Now, everybody has their own life, their own personal things going on, and if I personally couldn't be here, I wouldn't be here, but I have the opportunity to be here, so I'm going to be here every time.
Hamilton's TD Coliseum will host 2 qualifier games, with Canada taking on Puerto Rico on Friday before facing Jamaica on July 6th. And Bo Bichette made an emotional return to Toronto on Monday, playing his first game in a visiting uniform and going hitless as a member of the New York Mets. Bichette received a loud ovation from the Toronto crowd when he stepped to the plate at the top of the first inning. He acknowledged the fans with a wave before stepping out of the batter's box, removing his helmet and saluting the crowd.
Third baseman, number 19, Bo Bichette.
Bo tipped his cap to the crowd when they applauded him after the video, and going to give one more wave. And again, I think every fiber of his being is, can we just play baseball now? And Vladdy's saying, take your helmet off. Not many can make Bo smile in moments like these, but Guerrero still has.
Speaking to reporters before first pitch, the 28-year-old appeared emotional as he reflected on his 7-year tenure with the Blue Jays, pausing more than once while answering questions from the visitors' dugout. When asked if he has seen Vladdy Jr. yet, Bichette began to respond but paused, looking out at the field and visibly fighting back tears.
Have you had your reunion with Vlad yet? Or?
I haven't. I will, though.
What do you think it'll be like to see him again?
It'll be good.
Oh, how has your relationship evolved with Vladdy over the years, from coming up to the minors together to being up with the Blue Jays and playing in the World Series together?
I mean, we went through it all together. The one goal we had together, we didn't accomplish it, but I've seen him at his lowest. He's seen me at mine. And vice versa at our highest. So, yeah, I mean, from teammates as kids to...
And Edmonton firefighters are sharing a video of what they're calling weekend llama drama after crews rescued an animal from a sinkhole. The 28-second clip shows firefighters pulling a dirt-covered llama from a 3-meter-deep sinkhole on Sunday. Edmonton Fire Rescue Services says the opening was too small to safely extract the animal by hand, so crews used a mini excavator before carefully lifting the llama out with rescue slings. The operation was successful, and the llama was not injured.
Hold on to.
Right there. I got you. See?
Yeah.
Pretty small. Oh, you'll be okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, he doesn't want to come up.
No, he'll go. He'll go.
He just needs to get his legs.
Tired.
Yeah, needs to get his legs going. Good job, boys.
Nice work.
1, 2, 3. Here we go. Woo! Good job.
Hey, buddy. Does the llama have a name?
Yeah. Runner. Runner. Yearling.
I'm Teresa Skubic, and that'll do it for your look at national and international news for today. For more news on demand, you can always visit our website at forumdailynews.ca and make sure to follow us on our social media handles on X and TikTok. You can also watch all of our commentary programming on the News Forum YouTube channel. Good night, Canada.